Hello, welcome. This is the first and only magazine show with the latest news and information from the UK energy scene. Oil or diesel, wind or solar, it's all here in the next 30 minutes. So, this week, the man who would be in charge of energy in the UK if the Reform Party, ahead in the polls right now, actually formed the next government. Richard Tice tells us what's gone wrong with energy policy to date.
We were a rich nation when we had cheap energy. We're now getting poorer per person by the week, the month, the year. And the primary reason for that is we've got the highest electricity prices in the developed world.
The Forties oil field at 50. Happy birthday to an area of the seabed that's been worth $500 billion at today's prices to the UK economy over the last 5 decades. And we look ahead to COP30. The Brazilian hosts are hoping to make progress on a number of fronts at the next climate conference, and the UK has deemed it important enough to send the Prime Minister to South America. Joining me to discuss the week's events, Greg Newman is here, Chief Executive Officer of the Onyx Capital Group. Let's have a listen to the interview, if we can, and some extracts from it. My interview with Richard Tice MP, who is, of course, the MP in Lincolnshire. He's the Deputy Leader of Reform. His constituency is Boston and Skegness. Now, there are only 5 Reform MPs in the House of Commons just now, so he shadows the energy brief. We spoke a few days ago about some of the big questions around energy policy and how his ideas are nearly always very different to those being enacted by the Labour government.
I've met oil and gas companies in Aberdeen and in London, and Nigel Farage and myself have said to them very, very clearly, a Reform government will grant you all the licences and exploration permits that you want, obviously subject to the usual regulations regarding safety, but we've said to them, get your applications ready. A Reform government is coming, and get them ready in the year before. I've even said, in order to try and accelerate the process, we might look at having some form of shadow regulator that can, in draft, look at and approve any such licence applications in the run-up to a general election, so that if we win a general election, then those applications, we know that they are basically pretty much oven-ready, good to go. And the people we spoke to are delighted by that pro-growth, pro-energy agenda. We're very clear. You cannot be a rich nation unless you have cheap energy.
Well, you couldn't get clearer than that, Greg, could you? He wants to drill and keep drilling indefinitely, yes. Perhaps.
Yeah, it's a big, complete 180 to the Labour government and even the Conservative government before that. And it's like we were talking about last week. I mean, there are a lot of benefits that are immediately obvious from the commercial point of view. But I guess he goes quite a bit further than that, because it's introducing fracking as well. So I think one of the main arguments that people have been pushing, that on the antithesis of doing more drilling in the North Sea, is we're running out of production. And you could dispute that, and people are disputing that. Like Wood Mackenzie came out with a big report being like the 9 or so billion barrels that could be there or are proven to be there. It could be as much as 25 or 30 billion barrels if you really apply some of the techniques in drilling that are up and coming. And we've always been in a state in the world of improving drilling to get more production. And fracking is a version of that, right? That's what the US did. They started fracking, they got this new technology, and oil was meant to be running out, and all of a sudden they're the biggest oil producers in the world. So him introducing that does signal that, no, not only do they want to, suck as much as they can out of the existing set of ecosystems that we have, it's no, let's go even bigger than that, and let's now introduce fracking, and let's be a leader in this space again, which excites me personally. But yeah.
Okay, well, let's hear from himself on that very point, shall we? Here's Richard Tice then explaining why he is a big fan of the fracking idea.
Well, let's be clear. We're talking about shale gas, which is the energy treasure under our feet. There's a decade plus worth in Lincolnshire alone. And fracking is just one technique of extracting shale gas. There are other techniques. The technology evolves all the time. But why is it that America's got gas prices a third of ours? The answer? Shale gas. The answer? Because they frack, they extract it. There's about 20 million people that live within a mile of a shale gas well. They barely know they're there. They're tiny. They're safe. And that's the reason why the American economy is growing fast. It's powering ahead. They get richer. We get poorer. It's a catastrophe. We should be using all our energy treasure. We should be using the technology as it evolves. And it's a great opportunity. We should go for it. I tell you what, when I talk to people in Lincolnshire, they're very proud of the idea. Lincolnshire gas for Lincolnshire jobs and Lincolnshire growth.
Well, that couldn't be clearer. Again, Greg, how mature is the whole shale gas industry, though? When you're placing a bet on whether it's going to work or not, whether you want to invest money in it or not, how certain can you be?
Well, this is the thing. So there was a big commitment in the US to fracking and drilling, horizontal drilling and all these techniques. They kind of had open rein to explore it. I think that's when we talk about the political side of things and how investable is a country. And despite, whoever you want to talk about who's been presidents before pro-oil Trump, you have as an oil driller, oil producer, an independent wildcatter, as they call it, you've had largely free rein to explore underneath your land. It's very different in the UK, right? You have like the royalty, the king owning a lot of the land, and it's very different. And, you're talking about drilling underneath potential land rather than just offshore. It's a very, very different concept. It would be a dramatic change. But I guess what's interesting for me was I kind of written off in my head as well. That, I've heard about fracking being discussed. It causes earthquakes, and that's what you've
There's
heard.
all those alarm things around it.
Well, but it was a big deal.
Concerns,
2019 it got banned, properly banned. And since, I don't think people have really talked about it. So to bring it up again makes me think that he really has spoken with the industry a lot. And then actually, let's not forget, earlier on in the year, Egdon Resources were making huge claims about Lincolnshire, which is obviously where it is important to him, has an enormous potential field for fracking gas. And the claims there were like, 100 to 140 billion in GDP, 250,000 jobs, that kind of stuff, which obviously is aspirational. But I think when you read that and you see that, and it's not viable, it's not yet, couldn't classify it as proven from what I understand and what I'm reading. But at the same time, there's obviously enough excitement from Richard Tice to be like, God, that is so not what the Labour government would do right now. If I was to come in, you could go from basically failing, fledgling industry to bang, huge economic growth and tax receipts.
With the timeline involved, though, they're not in power yet. It's 4 years, 3.5 years possibly out if they get the gig. And then there will be a beginning time, and renewables are coming on stream. So let's hear a little bit more about that. Richard Tice was pretty dismissive about solar in general, and certainly not in the fields of Lincolnshire. By all means, put a panel on your roof, though.
Look, climate change is real, has been for millions of years, always will be for millions of years. The arrogance amongst the eco-zealots who think that they can stop the power of the sun and stop the power of volcanoes, that are the two primary determinants of climate change, is truly shocking. And I can tell you my constituents are raging furious at the cost of their bills, that the idea that 100 square miles of Lincolnshire should be covered with solar panels completely surrounding whole villages, the idea that hundreds of pylons should blight my constituency is nothing short of a scandalous outrage. I've told National Grid, bury the cables or we will force you to bury them at your shareholders' expense. So people need to know we are deadly serious about this. Net zero is the wrong thing at the wrong price in the wrong time frame, and we're going to stop it. We are rapidly changing the course of the debate and encouraging investors and shareholders, invest in oil, invest in gas. That's the future.
So, some limited interest in the solar market. I found the whole thing about Chinese panels. Everyone in the world's putting up Chinese panels, isn't it? He's averse to that. Which would mean, I suppose, his interest in solar is even limited further, probably limited by the amount of Canadian panels he can get hold of.
Yeah, that was interesting. And this is obviously not really my expertise, but anecdotally, it's interesting to consider how aggressive he was being on the geopolitical element, which, really, when we talk about private investment in renewables, and a lot of it is foreign, right? Foreign investment. And he's highlighting that. So, they do benefit. And at the same time, when we have CFD mechanisms that he also talked about, guaranteeing the price to foreign firms, you don't really get that back in your economy as much as you would if it was domestic. So I understand its kind of general point, obviously, but in terms of land, farmland versus roofs and all that, I mean, okay, fine. I mean, it sounds logical.
Yeah, that's coming, isn't it? I mean, the French, I think, are putting, if you've got a car park above a certain size, you have to put the panels over the car park. That's a good use of land, right?
It is. I mean, again, it's a shame Julian's not here, and we will obviously talk about this next week and beyond. But what you're actually getting from solar, and especially 28 million odd homes in the UK, how effective is it really going to be? I think the answer would be, in combination with other renewables. But it doesn't sound like he was against it at all, like you were saying, like you're saying. But it is about the Chinese element, and all the Chinese spy stuff going and all that. Clearly, it's a bit of a dig as well, right?
Of course.
What's going on. So,
And again, the world may have changed. Greg, there's some other headlines we need to talk about this week, because I note that the ExxonMobil chief exec, Darren Woods, has told Reuters the US energy firm may stop doing business in the European Union unless the bloc changes a sustainability law. Now, what's he on about? Why is he particularly concerned with what the EU are doing?
So it's the new law that's coming in 2026. So it's been, from my understanding, more of like a transitionary thing at the moment, but it's coming in hard in 2026. So a carbon border adjustment mechanism, CBAM. It's just, to be honest, the way I'm seeing it, it's just a tax on anything you're importing that's considered fossil fuels. So it's just coming at a really bad time, isn't it? Like, we've got energy prices already high. And then, I mean, if you're smart, I guess, from a government perspective, you'll try and avoid the link to energy prices, but it will impact energy prices, or it'll just impact everything. And it's quite inflationary. And I mean, that's why I know you mentioned the introduction, COP30 coming up. It's just such an important time, because you're really losing the kind of faith in the net zero project, largely speaking, around the world. UK are still hanging on to that leadership concept, and obviously Ed Miliband is banging that drum. So when he's faced with these things, and faced with big countries coming out and saying, we're not going to trade with you if you do that, you're up at so many headwinds now. Before you were trying to lead, now you're going against everyone. And by the way, your public are not enjoying the high energy prices. It's making it very awkward indeed. But that's what I think is so interesting about this timing, and obviously Richard's all over that, right?
Yeah, he would have the public on his side as well. Look, we've got a significant birthday we need to mark. Take a look at this.
The Forties Field was the very great one, but it was a remarkable pioneering spirit, and many people will claim that their field started it, but the Forties Field started the North Sea in earnest.
If we hadn't taken advantage of the North Sea opportunity, we should have been short. It was a project of a scale that, I don't think Scotland's ever seen before. Not just size, but the sheer groundbreaking technology involved. Frankly, it was science fiction type engineering developments.
It's an incredible story. BP was able to do tremendous things when they developed the field in the 70s, somewhat similar to putting a man on the moon, because they were going into uncharted territory. A development of this type had never existed in the North Sea.
This was seen in many ways as being quite a big game changer. After the times when we had been on the back foot, we'd been on the receiving end of the price increases pushed through by Saudi Arabia and the others, and suddenly here we were going to have a chance to be in the driving seat, and it was indeed the start of a golden age.
Well, that was a clip from a company video from Apache. They now own the Forties Field off the coast of Scotland. It was a video made 10 years ago, actually, to mark the 40th anniversary. There was an expectation that exploration may well have stopped by now, but in actual fact, it's still going, isn't it? And still going well.
Another example of, proven reserves is very, there's a barrier to that statement, right? But actually, when it's unproven and there's all these technological advances and geology is uncertain, you don't know if you keep going, and private companies are still willing to invest. But from the birthday perspective, I mean, there's two things. One, immediately, it's quite interesting to me because I've got a little thing on my office that basically a bubble of Forties oil. It was the first time that they, from BP days, when they owned the field, when they dug it up, they gave all their employees, and one of them was my best friend's dad, and he gave it to me for a wedding present. But anyway,
right.
The point is that Forties Field, again, for the average person, it's like, who cares, right? But it's incredibly important. And why? because Forties is in the North Sea fields that are used to set the price for Brent, which in turn is used to set the price for as much as 80% of the world's oil. That's hugely significant, right?
Right.
It's a price setter. And then Forties is one of those grades, one of 5 or 6 grades now, and that is the cheapest, generally speaking. So because it's the cheapest, it tends to set the price. That's how the methodology works. So more often than not, it's kind of changed recently because of the US oil now being involved in the benchmark. But I don't want to get too technical. The point is that Forties Field for the longest time has been setting the world's oil. The whole world's oil price, 80% of it at least.
That relatively small area of the North Sea has been driving the whole thing.
Incredibly important. And the Forties pipeline, which, famously for the industry at least, was connected to Grangemouth refinery. It goes straight in, pipeline straight into the UK. That mechanism is just so unbelievably important, as I say, because it's this oil that sets the price. So when anything went wrong, it was hugely significant and still is to some extent. There was a hairline fracture in 2019 and it's paused production for a few days, and Brent skyrocketed, the Brent time spread skyrocketed. It was carnage. I was in
consequences of one little crack.
And it wasn't even down, it was temporarily down. And then the price setter agency, the index setter Platts, they had to make adjustments and they had to say, force majeure. And there was a big calamity because it's amazing, right? This tiny oil field, relatively speaking, to the rest of the world has been so important to the world. Would you know that? So I don't know.
No,
it still is.
I wouldn't. And we have to acknowledge, I think, back 50 years ago, the engineering skills that went into actually creating that oil field, it wasn't straight question of moving stuff in from the rest of the world. They really had to think it through.
100%. But this is what we're talking about. BP in particular were incredibly innovative company, obviously still are, but they were world leaders. And this is what I was talking about last week when we can't give up, I believe, all this expertise that we've got. This was 50 years ago and it sets the world's oil. Why are we just saying who cares about that? It's incredibly important. And so
it's an asset worth preserving. Okay. We mentioned COP. Let's do it now with start of COP30 in Brazil coming up over the next 10 days or so. The latest global emissions report has been published by the UN. An introduction from the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres.
Renewables are leading that transformation and rewriting the rules of energy. Costs are falling, investments are rising, innovation is surging. Clean power is now the cheapest source of electricity in most markets and the fastest to deploy. It strengthens energy security, cuts pollution, and creates millions of decent jobs. Leaders must seize this moment and waste no time in tripling renewables and doubling energy efficiency by 2030, building modern grids and large-scale storage, and ending all new coal, oil and gas expansion in a just and equitable manner. The clean energy revolution must reach everyone, everywhere. But developing countries face crippling capital costs and a fraction of global investment. They also need far greater support to adapt to worsening climate impacts, protecting lives and building resilience. We need a quantum leap in climate finance to lower the cost of capital and expand concessional lending.
Greg, interesting to notice he talks about the financing of renewables, the familiar refrain coming from the UN Secretary General here about climate change and everything else, and let's do more about it, celebrating the progress made on renewables. But actually the finance industry of the renewable side of energy are going to have to wake up to his call or not. I mean, that will be how this thing works, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, going back to 2021, which I would say is the peak of net zero talk and investment and the greenifying of everything, greenwashing. You had trade houses, in oil, that everything was about, we're a positive renewable company. You're an oil company, but you're just glossing. The joke was, beyond petroleum that with BP, how they had Bernard Looney really banging the drum. That all peaked in 2021. It was very easy to get financing. If you put green on anything, it was a bit like AI now. You would get investment. And I think there was a worry for some time. People thought a lot of those companies, it's a huge bubble, it's going to burst. Funnily enough, what's recently been talked about, at least in the FT I was reading, sort of Bloomberg rather, that despite particularly the Trump side of things, the green equity markets, the equity markets exclusively for the green technologies are doing very well. And I guess from a financing perspective, that's ultimately all you're going to care about. Is there a return? Are we seeing a performance? And I would say the work had been done, in my opinion. And yes, it was a bubble, and yes, it was a bit crazy the way people were just washing everything. But now it looks kind of more and more viable, right? So I think I kind of understand the call to arms for financing, but if it's economical, it's economical, and that's markets, right?
The market will follow, isn't it? If there's a profit to be made.
Yeah, but solar, that kind of thing, the cost 95% down in the last 20 years in cost. So I can't see why and Elon Musk was also talking recently, like he takes a much more pragmatic point of view. In 50 years time, it's probably going to be a bit of a job to unwind if we have trillions of carbon emissions in the world to change chemical composition of the world. But let's not be so alarmist. We've got time. We just need to lean into this transition. So I think people are on board with that concept. We're not going to unwind anything. So when Richard Tice says, just forget it all, I don't think that's going to happen.
Quite the right approach.
And I think there's money in it, to be clear. And that's what he's getting at.
Well, the Prime Minister's over there, I think, over this week in the sort of pre-build-up, and I'm sure on next week's programme we'll be alluding to COP30 because it'll be underway and things will already been said. Just as we came into the studio, actually, Greg, we've got some word here, a small matter, but you may have some money owed to you on your electricity bill. Ofgem, the regulator here in the UK, so you should check your accounts, check if you've moved house.
I mean, I had the opposite. They were demanding money from me the other day. But I understand, like, the things with the price cap, it got quite complicated, didn't it? And I think, you forget that the difference between electricity in particular and gas than oil, gasoline, diesel, it's so much more, your bills are so much more volatile. And there's all these changes and subsidies going. You do need to keep on top of it because it can benefit you.
You moved house in the middle of a quarter or something, you might have 200 quid invested on the old house's gas bill. That's what they're saying. Anyway, it's worth double checking with your supplier, whoever that is. Right, we've got the latest data. Let's just walk through these. The forward curve, this is on diesel prices, I think, isn't it?
Yes. So again, what do we mean by forward curve? So we just turn to NOV, of course, where we are now. And you look at the green, so we're £1.46 roughly, or £1.45.50-ish. That's where we are right now. What the forward curve means is the market's already pricing in the future, right? So right now, this is what we call backwardation. Let's not go into it right now, but the point is that because of views on storage economics and things like that, the market is trading the future months at more of a discount than what we are right now. So basically, if you're trying to hedge, if you can, and we'll be talking about that in a bit, but generally speaking, if things stay the way they are, you should see a reduction in your pump price. Unfortunately, this is what we mean by markets being so dynamic, right? That they're not efficient despite what people tell you. That might be pricing in by February, that prices will be down to £1.42 on diesel. But I can tell you right now that the calls from the oil market, you have the CEO of Totsa, I think the trade houses, Vitol, Mercuria, they're all saying, guys, you really need to watch out because this latest Trump sanctions is not being factored into the market enough in their view. And I think
that could be a disruptor.
A huge disruptor to the price, and we haven't really seen anything yet. And I think in particular on diesel, that's the impact on Russia in particular. It could be a hell of a lot higher than right now. So if you could hedge, and we'll talk about this in a bit, it's a good time to do it. But yeah.
This is the UK Energy Show, brought to you by Flux, the biggest news, information and trading platform for world energy markets from Onyx Capital Group. Now, next up, what's the buzz? We've had quite a lot of feedback to the items we've been posting on social media channels, so we need to check on what's being said. Greg was with me once again. Here's a post, for instance, underneath the YouTube interview with Richard Tice we posted. Here's just one remark, which was common of many. It's not cheap just because it's in our territory. I imagine he's talking to UK Energy. We've sold the rights to foreign companies who then sell it at market prices. You know what forms of energy are cheap and homegrown? Renewables. Well, we know where that guy or girl is coming from.
Cheap and homegrown in terms of, I guess, the input being wind and that kind of thing. But I think if you look into it, right, renewable infrastructure is very invested by foreign companies as well. So,
yes.
And even when you look at the oil and gas, I don't know about that. I mean, there's a lot more legacy companies that are more, certainly BP still owns assets, for example. But yeah, I mean, I would actually go back to if we were to reinvest into our refinery complex, we've only got 4 now, and build that back up to, I don't know, 10 plus, that it's been more in more recent times. That's a lot of investment that we should be encouraging. That could be domestic. So I get the point, though. It's just a bit of a whatever point.
Well, it's a comment. It's a free country.
Yeah.
We get quite a few Reddit followers. So thank you very much indeed for doing that to us. Here's one. We've got 10-year supply of our own proven reserves. Norway's got 15. Time to start drilling for new wells.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is the argument that's always said. But again, we are talking about, the numbers, 3.3 billion, definitely we know, 9 potentially billion barrels, but as much as 30 according to other sources, because we don't know. We've got to apply these technological advancements. And we just talked about fracking, right? Fracking could really increase that. But more importantly than that, people don't know. And then you see online, you see politicians say, the experts say that. But if something's an estimate, it's a bit like asking a company for an estimate on anything. Like, what's their agenda behind it? Like, why would they necessarily know themselves unless something's completely verifiable? They don't want to get caught out themselves. Anyone who's predicting wants to be kind of conservative or just wants to go along with whatever you say. We've got consultants in our game, in the oil market, who just say whatever OPEC want them to say. I mean, quite literally, we talk about it all the time.
Hey, I could do that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They just say oil market price is going to go up. Of course they're going to say that because everyone benefits. So I think that it's that A, and B, let the market do the talking. There are still companies that are willing to take the risk on UK assets, which I find surprising because it's completely against it. They obviously think, I don't think it's being tapped up with some of the newer technology. But then worse than that is Norway's state companies want to invest in our assets. So doesn't that say everything for me? So I mean, I don't know, that's very frustrating. And I would just straight up disagree. I think maybe he'll say
there's plenty of that going on Reddit as well.
No, I know, but what people love to do is say, but it's proven, the experts, what do I care what an oil trader thinks? I've seen this, I've seen this report. It's like, what, you've never seen an official report be bollocks? Like, you know what I mean? So anyway, I get it, but I would really implore people to kind of just look around it, right? And see the other points, see what other people are saying, see what private companies are doing.
Well, this is the part of the fund responding to some of the Reddit comments. Quite a long essay here. I won't read it all to you. Your gas bills went up. That's got nothing to do with net zero, says this poster, who I think is somebody called Steve, responding to somebody else. As the UK needs less gas to produce electricity, there's less demand, so the price goes down. Wind and solar to produce electricity actually saved the UK 100 billion in cheaper gas and electric since 2010, and so it goes on. It's a lively debate, and it's interesting to follow the threads there, isn't it, of people, the to and fro of all this.
It is, but again, you're just taking, so someone came out and made that statement. It's very hard to verify, because what you're saying is the gas prices were where they were, and the electricity is set by the marginal price of gas. So if we just set the price based on wind and solar, we would have had cheaper electricity, but it's not about that. It's about the grid infrastructure. It's just more, you can't set everything on the wind and solar because it doesn't supply enough. We need to use gas. So yes, if we change the CFD mechanism, but Jill and I were talking about that a week or so ago, and it would probably reduce your bill by about £100. So it's not as cut and dry as that, but I understand obviously the sentiment.
It's an adjustment rather than a slam dunk. Okay, well, here's another one just to finish off with, quite a light-hearted remark, I think. Again, responding to Richard Tice, what is a foreign renewable? I guess that's what he said during the interview. Are the Dutch hoarding all the wind?
I think it might have actually been the way we worded it on our
maybe
thing
we did. But clearly not. Clearly not. But it's interesting. I mean, the Dutch aren't hoarding the wind. Wind, we should just say in passing, I think the stats for October came out from the electricity generating people, the NESO people, and it was over half, 60% or something, in the month of October of our electricity was generated by wind. So that's where we are.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is, that is one of the benefits of being an island, of course, because Germany, the market's still very worried about the lack of wind. It caused a lot of problems.
We use it all.
Exactly, yeah, we hoard it.
They get none of it. And so it goes on. All right. Well, before we go for this week's edition, let's just look ahead, if we may, Greg, to next week. The COP30 main event, of course, starts on Monday. So by the time we do another one of these programs, it'll be well underway. You got any ideas of what decisions may or may not be taken?
Well, I think there's one thing is the COP itself and the things that come out there. But I think obviously for the UK audience, it's about what has been said around it. And I think just one thing to note from me, just because we talked about Richard Tice and his interview, I think more and more what I'm seeing is when people talk about domestic oil and gas production and fracking, etc., there is this argument increasingly coming in, which is, look, if people are starting to accept that we're going to need oil and gas for at least 10, 20, 30 years, whatever it is, even if we do a hardcore transition, then isn't it better to have it domestic so you have less carbon emissions? And even with the one in Lincolnshire, the fracking project in Lincolnshire, the potential project, that's 200 billion emissions they were talking about avoiding by having it domestic. So I think that argument, expect that argument to be made more and more. And I personally think it's quite compelling, because if we're going to use it anyway. So COP30 is all about, we do need this stuff. The energy centers from the AI boom, that's kind of taken charge, and expect that to be talked about a lot as well. It's going to be very hard for Ed Miliband to do the whole, but we need to keep going, and we're the leaders, because people are pretty bored of the UK's point of view now, would be my point of view. So,
well, before we go, we also should mention the fact that one of the aims you've got here is to try and bring this whole, the mystery, to demystify, if you like, particularly the energy market and the oil market and so on and so forth. And in the coming weeks, there will be a way that people can democratize that to a handheld device.
So this is obviously, I'm super excited about it. If you know anything about the business, which most people probably don't, the wider audience, but if you check us out, flux.live or onyxcapitalgroup.com, or check me out on LinkedIn, the books I've written, or the book I've written, the content we put out there, everything is about our position in the market is providing prices. And why shouldn't we provide prices if we're doing it for all the trade houses, the majors, the big oil companies, why can't we do that for everyone? The big challenge to that is people are like, I either don't get it, or I don't even know how to think about what you're talking about. What even is hedging, this kind of thing. So what I'm really on a mission on to do personally with the business and all the guys here is, let's create tools and intuitive tools so people can understand how to use this market that we trade to benefit themselves. And essentially boils down to the first big step there is try and use this market to protect yourselves against price increases, which, look, as I said, with Russia and the sanction situation, is a really big deal. So we're going to be talking about what that solution is, and it's an app, and we'll get into it. But just to note, super excited. And yes, it is about demystifying, but it's also providing solutions, right? Anyone can moan and get on a podcast and talk shit about everything, which is what a lot of people do. We want to provide solutions as well. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Look out for that. It'll be available on all the usual places, including where you're watching this. So thanks for watching this edition. Any thoughts? Please do add them to the comments. We'll see you next week.